Hello and welcome to GameSpot's comprehensive spoiler chat of Red Dead Redemption 2. We're going to try to hit just about everything. We made a nice little outline here of everything we'd like to talk about, and we've kind of divided up into chapters. My name's Jake. This is
I'm
Mike
Mike.
over here.
Howdy.
Hi, I'm Lucy.
I'm Kallie.
All right, let's start from the beginning. So the first thing, chapter 1, as I put it, the gang members and their fates. I figured we just kind of run through the gang members, talk about how we felt. Not all of them, just some of the more important ones.
Years.
Yeah, it would take a very long time. But anyway, the first one I have here is John.
We get a wagon full of something flammable, oil. Put it on the tracks. They see it. They know they either have to stop or die. Ain't no train driver wants to be cooked alive.
That is kind of brilliant.
We're going to talk about the epilogue at length, so maybe let's stop there, I would say. And we are going to talk about John's relationship with Arthur a bit later, too.
So is John generally as a character?
Yeah, John generally is a character. I know, like, talking to you before, you had some concerns of how, if you hadn't played the first one, it might be hard to connect with John.
Yeah, I think, like, at the beginning of the game especially, I think John is kind of relegated to, oh, we all know you like John, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on John. And I think especially at the first half of the game, there's a lot of time spent on other characters, which I appreciate as someone who played the first game. But I feel like if you didn't play it, you'd be like, who is this fucker? And then, oh, can we swear? Oops. And then I think you would, as the game progresses, you'd be like, why am I supposed to care? Like, there's not enough incentive to care about him, I think.
Yeah, it almost starts out, Arthur kind of vocally shows his distaste for John right at the beginning. So you kind of not really separate yourself from John, but you don't really interact with him as much as you do as someone like Charles or Dutch, obviously.
And like he's certainly positioned at the beginning of the game to be an asshole to not only everyone else for kind of having his little leave of absence after Jack was born, but, you know, he has the contention, like the rocky relationship with Abigail.
Yeah.
Whereas Abigail as a character is one who's super nice to you, and so you latch onto her more than I would say you would latch onto John. But then I think they managed to do that arc of, you know, you guys being so separate and distant from John and then bringing him into the fold to the point where, you know, towards the end of the game, you refer to him as your brother.
It also establishes it like the number one sin in this gang is disloyalty or like leaving. Obviously, later on that becomes huge with Arthur because it's a struggle for him to stop being loyal to Dutch and kind of have his own splinter group within the gang. But John leaving is like the cardinal sin for them. And then also like, so when you're going to save him right at the beginning, he's like, he's not coming back. Like we know what he's doing. And in reality, he was actually like in danger from like getting fucked up by wolves or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you even put how it's kind of interesting that John was kind of the disloyal one at first and Arthur criticized him for it, but near the end, Arthur kind of became more disloyal. Yeah, almost like kind of sees John's, not so much for abandoning Jack and Abigail, but kind of sees his reasons for wanting to leave the gang or step away.
Yeah, I think John ends up being a tremendous influence on Arthur, maybe not as much as other characters, which we will get to, but and then Arthur obviously is a huge influence on John as well. So that they kind of have this give and take that I really appreciate. But I do think there could have been a little bit more done. And maybe that was a result of me having to play through the game really quickly because I was reviewing it and I had to finish it in a certain amount of time. And so I didn't spend as much time as I wanted, like hanging out at the camp and Rob's famous "What Karen" video. Like
we'll get that in here.
That.
What, Karen?
I didn't get to see stuff like that. I tried and I eavesdropped on other conversations. One of my favorite ones was at Shady Bell. He was asking Abigail to like move into his lodging.
Oh yeah.
And it was really, really cute. And I was like, oh, he's coming around. He's such an idiot, but he's like really trying with her. And so I think those things are present. It's just I missed it a little bit in the main story for me.
Yeah, that was kind of a little bit off topic, but that was kind of an issue with going through the game fast, was that characters like Charles I didn't get to spend a lot of time with, even though he's one of my favorite. I've heard some of the best missions are the hunting ones with Charles.
I didn't do any of those.
I only did a couple things with Javier, and I really liked Javier, even though he didn't get a lot of time like in the main story. The side interactions I had with him were always pretty good.
Yeah. Javier was an improvement from the first game, from what I remember. So I haven't played the first. So we'll get into this, but I haven't played the first game in 5 years. So
He just shows up with a sombrero halfway
The
through the game.
biggest sombrero in the world, by the way.
Like he's the Mexican of the story
Yeah.
at that point, right?
Yeah.
I felt because I went on a home robbery with him, and I didn't feel like there was much depth to him in 2, but he was enjoyable to be around. And then by the time when the end rolled around, and like he was still really loyal to Dutch. Like Bill's going to be. Well, they're both going to be from the first game. Yeah. Bill just kind of seems.
Bill's like a loyal dog. It makes sense.
Yeah, he needs a leader, like someone he can latch onto.
He's just a generic idiot.
Javier, I didn't really understand enough to be like, oh, I get why he's with Dutch. But like, there's a part where it's one of the last times you're all riding. I think it's the train robbery in Saint Denis that goes wrong. Javier's like, what happened to loyalty? I'm like, where's this coming from? Like, I get it. Like, that's kind of, again, that makes sense because that's how the rest of the gang is conditioned. And like, you want to talk about like biblical references all the time. Dutch is like, you're all apostles of Dutch for most of the game. And then apparently Javier is still really loyal, which again, it makes sense having played the first game and seeing how his arc closes. But I didn't really feel like it got there in the second game.
Yeah, I feel like, understanding Javier, because Javier is very different from Bill, even though they're both in the first game as your antagonists in a way.
Yeah.
He seems, at least to me, it seemed like more like he was just out for himself. But I thought at least in 2, he's given a more nuanced approach to his culture rather than a giant sombrero.
Yeah.
So like, I liked that he's playing the guitar and singing songs for people, and everyone's like singing along to De Colores or whatever. Or
that scene after you rescue Jack and he's playing by the fire. That's really good. But yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. Like, that was one of my issues with it. Like when we had finished and we talked about it, it just seems strange that Javier was all of a sudden like super loyal to Dutch and criticizing you for your rebellion.
Yeah.
And that's part of it is that maybe because Javier wasn't really as involved with at least the missions that Arthur was in and John were in, where you kind of see Dutch's sort of madness, I guess.
Yeah.
Effect. And he's just kind of there as essentially like a bystander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he's just kind of like, hey, why is everyone going against the grain? I don't understand what's happened. I'm just going to, remain loyal to what I know.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to correct myself. It wasn't De Colores, it was Canton no Llores. So
I really, really liked. So, full disclosure, I love Sadie Adler. I think she's the most enjoyable Rockstar character ever. But Dutch, I think, is the best character in this game. Not a good person, but he's a good character. I think the more it's really cool you brought that up, because the more he unravels and feels like he's losing control of these people who he's essentially brainwashed, the more he tries to prove himself to the ones that are doubting him. Mm-hmm. So he knows he doesn't need to prove anything to Bill or Javier or Micah, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end he shoots him in the stomach. But for John and Arthur, he knows those two. John especially has been doubting him for a while, and Arthur's like if he loses control of Arthur, he loses control of the gang. Like in his mind, I'm sure, because it's his first mate, pretty much.
Yeah.
And like the more he tries to prove to them, the more you see Dutch is really just doesn't know what he's doing much of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, throughout the game, you see him falling apart.
Yeah.
Like you see him kind of going crazy. Like not overtly crazy, but some of the ways he's responding. Like there's that one scene, I don't know if you guys got, but Dutch like casually just looks at Arthur and he's like, "You look like the type who's gonna betray me."
Oh,
and it's just like,
was that
it's kind of early. I think it's like halfway through.
It's pretty
I don't think I
early.
saw that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like pretty
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, thinking about like everything that happened, I was like, that'd be weird if I saw that.
Yeah. The side note about like Dutch and his mismanagement of the gang is I feel like that results in, I mean, this is partly Micah too, and maybe we can get to it a little bit later, but I think it got really exhausting when you're like, when you figure, well, if you go into this game, you know he's going to lose it. Mm-hmm. And you go into these missions like, why I didn't want to follow him because I was like, this is going to go wrong. Like, I know this is a bad idea and I have to do it anyway. And I found like I was fighting against the game a little bit. And I do think that served a narrative purpose in that like you get to experience Arthur's inner turmoil in that way.
I had a plan. I still have a plan.
What plan? What goddamn plan, Dutch? Tahiti? Timbuktu?
That's enough.
Yeah, there were definitely times when I feel like the game needed to remind you that you don't really have choice over, like, you don't have too much agency over what you're doing in the big picture. Mm-hmm. You're very much playing Arthur's role, despite the fact that you can kind of change how he interacts with people in the world. it's going to be Arthur's role. He's still like, even at this point in the game when you know Dutch is making terrible decisions and you don't want to follow him to Saint Denis for this train robbery, Arthur still would, because he's been with Dutch for 20 years, I think they said at that point. So despite the fact that I felt like there were some points where the role playing conflicted with the main story, I think overall it was handled well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's just contradictory when you go into this world where you have a lot of freedom immediately, like almost immediately. You just kind of go wherever and do whatever. I think that is a little bit contradictory when you realize I actually don't have much choice. But I do think that was a good thing by the end.
Which is where I think the character of Hosea came in really to kind of cement your role within the gang, because obviously, R.I.P. Hosea, that was a bit of a gut punch.
Oh, I loved
Hosea.
I think you're supposed to love Hosea. He's hard to dislike, I think.
Well, he's one of the, like, I read Arthur's journal right away, and Hosea was like mentioned immediately, and I was kind of like, okay, this is an important character to Arthur, and you really see how, he operates as an opposite to Dutch in a lot of ways, and shows like, okay, let's temper this a little bit, and you see that Arthur kind of being split between Hosea and Dutch. I think he was a really good character in that way.
Yeah, because I think Arthur like outright admired Hosea, whereas Dutch, he's like, I've been with him so long, and he's just the default leader.
He's the dude.
Yeah, he's brilliant, but like, Hosea just consistently proved that he was actually thinking. I think it was finally the first time that Dutch makes you and Hosea he asks for both your opinions, is when you're about, I think it's when you're about to finally pit the Braithwaites and the Greys against each other. You're sitting in you're at Shady Bell at this point, so maybe that's incorrect. So that would have been after. I don't know. He finally asked you like what your opinion is about like robbing the bank in Saint Denis, and Hosea disagrees with you, and that's the first time where I'm like, I would have sided with Hosea, but again, this is Arthur's story, so I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Hosea's death too is pretty important, even though it sucked. Like that is really what kind of not set Dutch off necessarily, but like you were saying, he kind of like tempers Dutch, and without Hosea, you kind of start to see all these plans get wilder and wilder, and you're like you said, you're just there like, I don't want to do this, but Arthur Morgan has to, because what else would he do at this point?
Yeah. And it also just made me hate Milton all that much more when he shot him.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Sadie, but I think we probably should talk more about Sadie, because it seems like that
Everyone loves
is
Sadie.
everyone's
Sadie's
favorite
the
character.
best.
I was a married woman. You know what they did to me and to my husband? You're the only one of these fools that I trust. I've got to do this.
Her voice actress could be the lead singer of like an 80s punk band.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
incredible.
Or like a jazz band almost, like that raspy. Oh, it's so
She's
good.
like shrieking like a wildcat,
Yeah.
like when she just goes off and does her thing.
Yeah.
She's incredible. And I love Sadie's arc as well.
You see
It's
it from
just-
the very beginning. Well, not the beginning, but you see the beginning of her, like the inciting incident.
You can
like,
see like the fire in her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, even Dutch comments on it like right away. He's like, keep an eye on her. There's a fire in her eye or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I like that when you guys are away, when like Arthur and Dutch and everybody's away in Guarma, Sadie like really steps up, and you come back and you see like, oh, she's actually in a lot of ways the leader that they needed at this time. That just cemented her for me as I want Sadie DLC. Like I want to play as her. I want to do Sadie Bounty Hunter DLC because I love her so much.
I thought she was going to be, before I knew that you play as John Marston for another 8 hours for the epilogues, I thought maybe Sadie would be, because of what you just said, she took over as the leader when you were away. I thought maybe, again, also because like aside from Dutch, she has most reason to have beef with the O'Driscolls.
Yeah.
If not more than Dutch. Because they killed her husband, burned her house down, and like I think did some fucked up shit to her specifically. But then, of course, I was like, maybe they're gonna do an epilogue with her because, okay, again, I haven't played the first game in a while, but do we know how she dies? What happens? Because she gets injured at the end with Dutch and Micah.
I don't think she's mentioned.
She's not in the first game.
No,
Okay.
so many of these characters aren't mentioned in the first game at all.
So that's what led me to maybe think, oh, maybe she's going to be the epilogue. Because I knew there were epilogues, but I didn't know who you play as. John makes sense now in retrospect. But I was like, maybe it's Sadie, because she like becomes, in the epilogue, she's just this bounty hunter. Like badass. She's got this trench coat, a sawed-off shotgun in her
cool.
holster.
Yeah.
There's
she's
that
really
great scene too at the end where she asks Arthur to kill the last of the O'Driscolls hiding out in that, and he's like, I just can't do it. And she's like, you're the only one I can trust.
Yeah.
And like rolling up on the O'Driscolls and just having that one final fight's pretty cool.
Yeah.
when the O'Driscolls attack Shady Belle. And Arthur, everybody's like, "Where's Sadie?" And like you see the blip come up on the radar. They're like, "Go save her." That was the objective says, "Go help Sadie." And then you get back there, she's just fucking stabbing 3 O'Driscolls at a time. And then that's the first of 3 times you see her doused in blood.
Yeah.
The second time is with when she kills that O'Driscoll, and she's just covered in like she just like likes killing. And I love that like she turned into this bloodthirsty killer that would traditionally be this like several of the gang members, like the men in the gang are like that, but she just like enjoys. She even tells the guy from Del Lobos that you're capturing in the epilogue, she tells him, she's like, I just like fighting, and even more I like killing. And you're like, I know, I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's like scary. And I like that about her because the whole game you have Arthur's like moral conflict and like his internal turmoil, and then if John as a character has the same thing where he's trying to be good, and Sadie's just like, I'm past that. Like, they ruined my life. This is my life now. And I really appreciate that about her, is like seeing a different side of what their lifestyle does to somebody. Like, she's just kind of like, I had a life and now I don't, so I'm gonna just kill people.
Yeah, and then like one last thing about that, when Arthur is pretty much like planning to help the Marstons, John Marston, Abigail, and Jack get away and lead a life. They're having a conversation. It's either right before she kills that last O'Driscoll when you go to the ranch, or after. And he's like, let's help him get away. She's like, whatever, like, why? And then he's like, because we're both ghosts of people, but they still have a chance. And she's like, yeah, I know. And like, so like her and Arthur, I think, have that kinship. They know he's dying from tuberculosis. He also has done shit that he can't really make up for. Like, I think they both know that like they're beyond saving, kind of. So like, let's help these people, which makes the first game all that more kind of impactful, I think.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to the next talking point. But first, we haven't touched on Micah really at all, and we haven't touched on Charles. I guess I can start with Charles. I think he is probably my favorite character, and I really like how he shows up in the epilogue again, which we can talk about more.
Yeah.
I'm bummed I missed a lot of those hunting missions because they sounded really good, but he kind of felt like a guiding light to Arthur at times, which I thought was really cool. And his backstory, all the backstory we got from him, although it wasn't much, I thought was really well done. As for Micah,
Yeah.
Good character, like
he's a good character.
So well written.
Fuck that guy.
He's super well written.
He's like the Guarma Wormtongue
Yeah.
of everything. And it was so infuriating, like playing as Arthur, and you can obviously clearly see exactly, and you can completely identify with Arthur's frustration.
Yeah.
That he knows what's going on, and he's trying to point it out, and you're kind of like sitting there screaming at the TV going, look what he's doing, and just everyone else acting oblivious and turning it back on Arthur. I just thought he was annoying as shit, but he was so well written. I don't think I've ever hated, as particularly a rock star antagonist, as much as I hated Micah.
Yeah, and like I was so surprised too to find out that he was the one snitching. Like it makes sense, but I did not see that coming.
I was totally on board with like, oh yeah, it was Molly.
Yeah,
She's pissed off.
Molly hadn't really done much at that point in the story, and I was
all
like,
she was like into Dutch, and I saw him being like, "You're so beautiful," and I was like, "Are Molly and Dutch together?"
There was that one mission at Shady Belle where she is the quest giver, and you go up and talk to her, and all of a sudden Dutch comes up. He's like, "Sorry, I got to talk to Arthur," and then she's out of there. I was like, "All right, well," but that makes sense later on. But I was like, "What?"
Well, she keeps getting slighted by Dutch, so when she comes in, she's like, "Yeah, I told him." And I was like, "Oh, duh."
This is what you get for negging Molly O'Shea, Dutch, you piece of shit.
It was such a good bait and switch. And then when it was Micah, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. But I was kind of, because you see him like, he's kind of like Bill in a way where they both are kind of like rough. Bill is far more like, he's just kind of an idiot.
Yeah, he's not as much of a rat.
Yeah. But I kind of saw them as like,
Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
Yeah. And so in my mind, I think that positions Micah to be loyal when he's in fact not. And so I think that was a really smartly done arc where he's just, you hate him. He's very easy to hate, but you also don't expect him to betray anyone either, despite his total insanity.
I thought the way that it would go down was that he would do stuff from within, like purposefully mess up. Rather than snitching to the agents, I thought he was just gonna, at one point during the night, go around and kill everyone and take everything.
Yeah.
But then, he was doing the snitching and kind of working things out from the outside.
There are a few times during the game where, like, again, like to go back to like them comparing them to Dutch to Jesus and like them, you being the apostles. He calls you. Micah's the first one to call Arthur Doubting Thomas, like several times. I was like, well, if Arthur's Thomas, then who's the Judas? And then I was like, I just expected it was Micah because I looked around and he had the most motive to do it, and he was also new. He's that archetypical. This new guy that no one trusts, but like the leader vouches for him. So he's like the Mr. Blonde. So I was like, okay, maybe it's him. But then of course, like you don't find out until you're going after Milton, and then before Abigail kills him.
Arthur also like mentions multiple times when he's even he says it like directly to Micah, like things were going great until you showed up, and now Blackwater this and this and this, and now everything's falling apart.
Because it seems to me that since you've been riding with us, there ain't been nothing but trouble. Stirring things up all the time, getting in Dutch's ear. Seems wherever you is, there's Pinkertons and vice versa. So you better watch your goddamn mouth, boy! Or...
Take it easy, cowboy. You're gonna do yourself a mischief way you're heading.
Micah, shut it! He started it!
Yeah, I think it's hard to blame him entirely because you see Dutch continually make poor decisions. In addition to having the cops called on them, essentially, he's still not making great decisions. So it's like kind of hard to suss out what the actual source of the problem is.
I think Micah recognizes the really dark side of Dutch and like massages it to try to bring it out. And like, so it's not like he's not the source of it, but he's definitely he stoked the flames for sure.
He's doing it on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
And then we have Guarma. So this was a big surprise.
Yeah.
Whether you liked it or not, I'd still say it was a pretty big surprise how you wash up on shore in an island off of Cuba and all of a sudden take part in a sugar war, essentially.
Yeah.
So I felt the shipwreck, there seemed to be something cut from that sequence. When you board the ship and then something happens and then bam, shipwreck. I felt like there was some sort of mission in between. Yeah, I feel like something got cut.
I could see that.
Yeah. I thought Guarma was fine. It certainly wasn't my favorite section. It was very short. I don't think it served that much to the whole the rest of the story. I felt like I could have done without it. I liked the area. It was pretty. But, I mean, the missions there were not very memorable for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar to Mexico in the first game in that you're kind of getting into a thing that doesn't concern you, but that the better version of that comes after Guarma with Rains Fall and Eagle Flies. So I felt like, for me, it didn't advance my understanding of the gang much at all. It was just kind of like, oh, we got to save Javier. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I know he lives. Like, that was the point in the game where I was like, okay, just get to the point because first of all, it's like Monday and I need to write this review. But also I was just kind of like, yeah, everything's going wrong and I'm tired. I'm so tired.
So I agree that it seemed like some missions were cut and the missions there weren't that good. Like, they were fine. Like, it was mostly just like you're in a small place and you shoot people until the end of the mission and you trigger a cutscene. However, I think that whole thing was super important for the story. And I think we kind of talked about this a little too. But first of all, I mean, just like the fact that they robbed that huge bank, the whole place is, the whole place is like on red alert. Having them get away, I think, is important for the narrative just in that sense. Like, they just need to be away for a little bit. And then I think another important thing is that you're with all of the villains of the game, essentially. You're with Dutch, Micah, Bill, and Javier. And Arthur, I feel like, really gets a sense of who those people are when they are separated from the rest of the gang.
I think that's a very good point.
And then, most importantly, I think you see Dutch's like insanity. And I think Arthur would have only seen that insanity if he was far removed from reality, essentially, in this other place. And he kills that lady. And he's like, why'd you do that? And he's like, she was going to betray us. And he's like, betray us? Like, do you even know what she's saying? He's like, I know some Spanish. And then you climb up the ladder. His reasons change. Yeah. And you climb up the ladder. And then Arthur's like, are you going to choke me out too, Dutch? Yeah. And he's like, she was going to betray us. And he's like, how did you know? And he's like, I could see it in her eyes. Like, I thought you knew Spanish.
Yeah.
And he's like, let's just get Javier. And I think that scene is
Yeah.
super good, super important. I don't think that could have happened anywhere else.
That's fair.
I agree with that. I just don't think the Guarma sequence was necessarily well executed.
Right.
Like I think it could have been
That's fair.
executed
I
better.
think, like without getting involved in that sugar war and that, I think the thing that I'm probably focusing on more is just the relentless, hey, there's all these people coming, I'm gonna have to shoot them. That felt like it was more bloated than that concentrated moment. Like that concentrated moment was great, but then the wider surrounding missions would just kind of dragged it down.
That's fair.
Felt like the last mission of a mediocre Uncharted. Almost
It's
like
seriously,
the
I
amount
was
of
like,
people
I'm
you're
playing
killing.
Uncharted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never played Uncharted, but I was like, now I know what it's like.
Yeah.
Like-
so I'm with you. I'm with you too. I don't think it was executed well. I think I totally see the necessity of that. So also I love that. So throughout the game before that, the number one provision that I looked for was Guarma rum because it helped your dead eye and your health.
and it was
if I'm not
better than
mistaken.
Kentucky bourbon.
So-
Yes, or cigarettes and cigars because
Yeah.
it didn't drain your health core,
Yeah.
added to your health core. So like
Right from the
that was
beginning-
cool, drinking that the whole game and then
Yeah.
being like,
oh, I'm
here.
on Guarma.
That
Yeah.
established like
Yeah.
the fucked up the remnants of the molasses sugar slave trade, which like is still very much a thing here, even though they don't always talk about it. And I liked that they kind of, like as a Saint Denis stand-in for New Orleans, and then Guarma was like kind of this stand-in for actual sugar plantations.
They hint at it throughout the game too. Even from the first train robber mission, when you first hit Cornwall, one of the documents you pick up, Arthur's like sugar trade. Like, what is this about?
Oh, yeah.
They hinted at more throughout the game.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that until I played it the second time.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, they are kind of getting at this, which is clever. But yeah, once again, I understand that those missions I don't think were particularly good compared to the rest.
And then, lastly, I think going to Guarma, and so Dutch's plan up to that point was let's escape to Tahiti or Australia. We'll escape America, and then we'll be fine. And it sounds so fucking far fetched. Like, oh, you're gonna go to Tahiti or Australia? Well, Australia's not as far fetched, but you actually finally get outside. You go there. You see that there are still problems elsewhere, and you see that not only is Dutch and the people that are loyal to him worse, their true selves come out, but you see that plan holds no water.
Yeah, they
so,
can't
you
run
see-
from it.
You can't run
Yeah.
from your problems, which is very much a theme of
Well, you
John
can't-
Marston's as well. You're not going to escape this. I think Arthur finally realizes that it's over.
Yeah, you can't run from what you've done and
Yeah.
who you are.
And so when you go back to it, one of my favorite moments in this whole game was when you first get back off the boat and that song is playing as you're riding back to check on Shady Belle.
Yeah.
That's when you're finally looking at it. You're like, I think Arthur's like, okay, I need to face the music. I'm probably going to die here because he doesn't know he has TB at that point yet. I don't think he does.
No.
Yeah, because that's when you come back to.
But he's been coughing, and that's the
Right.
point where I was like, I'm dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, with most of my problems with this game, this is also true for Guarma, is that the things that maybe weren't good in the moment or I didn't quite enjoy in the moment, I felt always did serve a purpose, save for a couple small things. And that's ultimately why I chose 9 instead of 10, because it was okay, I have these problems. I think they do serve a greater purpose. And at the end of the game, I really appreciated them for Guarma being a narratively really key, but it just wasn't quite there for me. I'm with you on I was tired of the shoot a bunch of guys, get a cutscene, shoot a bunch more guys, get another cutscene structure at that point. But I think it all adds to your fatigue, and then that makes the turning point that much better. So it was hard for me.
It's a lot of Rockstar games where, in retrospect, I was like, oh, that was kind of brilliant, but not when you're playing. It was that wasn't executed all that well.
Yeah, and
That's
so
how I
it's-
felt about the majority of GTA 4. Looking back, I'm like, oh, I love that. But then, going back to play that game, I was like, fuck. Now I
Yeah.
know why
Yeah.
it took me so long.
Yeah.
I was replaying that recently.
Yeah.
It's a bit tough to play.
It's a bit unfair because it's an older game. Even GTA 5, but almost all Rockstar games, and I love Rockstar games, especially Red Dead Redemption 2, having just finished it yesterday, but finishing up a few last things an hour ago from now. It's now my game of the year, but it wasn't until the ending because I wasn't always enjoying everything.
You really need to get to the ending and take the time to appreciate those small things almost to like palate cleanse from the things that are hard to get through in the moment, because you do realize, like, I mean, you guys pointing out certain things about Guarma gives me a greater appreciation for Guarma than I did when I came in this room. But when I came in this room, I was like, screw Guarma, you know? So like, you do need to take the time to think about those things. And I think narratively that is really smart. But I also think that video game narratives don't always need to be the same as other narratives in other media. So there's ways that I would have appreciated it done that could have been better for me.
Yeah.
Moving on to chapter 6, kind of right after Guarma. This is when things kind of start to, when the shit hits the fan, as they say. You find out Arthur has tuberculosis. John has been captured. The Shady Belle has like fallen apart and they've moved. I don't know. There's a lot to talk about in this chapter. I guess we can kind of start with the big one, which is tuberculosis, which is pretty sad but brilliant. Also, like we were talking a little bit about how the game has you manage your health and so on. And there's even a thing that says like sickness. And everyone in like the
chat,
Discord, or not Discord, Slack was like, so do you think you get like a cold or something? And I'm just like, oh.
Yeah.
I know, everyone was like, so should we write like a guide on sickness? And we were like, no.
So yeah, that's what's, I was texting you right after I found out. So like many people, I noticed he was coughing a ton.
Yeah.
I was like, is he, I honestly didn't know what I thought, like, and then every time you ate something more than like, or smoked or drank anything, he coughed.
a lot.
Like, this is weird. And then finally you go back to Saint Denis and you just collapse. But
that was done so well.
Yeah,
that was
because it didn't feel like it was like a main mission. Like you
No, it
had
was like
just
in the
completed
middle.
something.
Yeah.
And you were on the street, and then
you were
random...
headed to see Sadie, at least for me.
Yeah, it was like in the middle of something. I collapsed and I was texting Jake like, "What's going on? Did I fuck up?"
But I love like the whole point in that game. Like even during the preview season of this game, when we're all like, "Oh yeah, they're just going for this detail porn." Like you are very much trying to add to the realism, or Rockstar's trying to add to the realism by making you manage your weight, how much you eat, your grooming, your shaving. You're getting these close-ups on Arthur's face, and you're like, oh, I haven't bathed in a while. I should bathe. You're getting really attached to his role and specifically his appearance, so that finally when you start to get sick, I feel like that actually makes you feel like you're in a sick character's role, because I woke up one day and they're like, you're at the minimum weight requirement. I was like, what? I just ate like 3 grilled venisons yesterday.
Kind of like what you were saying, how like it makes you think you have all these choices, but you actually don't. Kind of like this. It's like when you get to the end, Arthur's going to look like shit no matter what.
Yeah, he really looks like shit. I will say the weight management didn't impact, because I didn't really notice a physical difference when I ate enough. And I found...
you should see Dirty Artie.
I found it, and I wrote this in the review, I found it to be more trouble than it was worth to eat enough to be a normal weight. So I just kind of ignored. I was underweight the entire game, so I didn't have that impact when I was when he was sick, and it was like, you've hit bottom weight. I was like, I ate biscuits. Like I don't know what else to tell you.
I had that can of peaches a week ago.
Yeah, but like I think the beard and bathing and having to physically go to a place to bathe and like seeing his body and seeing like when you're in the bathtub and you have a lady come in and it's really awkward and stuff, like all of that contributes to, you have one idea of Arthur and then you see his face later on, you're like, wow, he looks bad.
Sunken eyes.
Yeah.
It was
Like blotchy.
Yeah.
Weird question. Did you guys ever, I know this is going to sound gross, did you ever take a bath as him after when he was really sick?
No.
It looks bad. Like it's not just his face. It's like his body is also like, he's not like decrepit, but he's getting there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did that
didn't even think
specifically
about that.
to see like, yeah. So I love that like they were building up all these things over the course of the game. I was like, oh, it's just adding to the detail. But then like, it's like they wanted you to get attached to these mechanics so then you could see them deteriorate. And it was, I thought that was really cool. But
I wish I could ever eat enough to be a normal weight.
Oh my God.
Like, I'll try cooking meat and see what that does. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't manage it.
Yeah, we found out through through Dirty Artie, which is just like a show where we're trying to make Arthur look as bad as possible. You have to eat a lot to see a difference.
But,
like I am constantly chugging cans of beans and like
yeah, but for me that's like I would rather be doing literally anything else.
Exactly.
So I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
gonna do that, you know.
But also there's the matter of how he got tuberculosis,
Oh,
which is pretty
so
huge-ish.
I I will say I was so busy punching that dude, I did not notice he had tuberculosis. I did not notice.
So I knew it had to come back because I was, first of all, I was like, I don't really want to do, what's his name's missions? Strauss's missions because I feel bad.
Oh,
but
I
you
did
had
so
to
many of them.
Really?
Yeah.
I did so many of them after that because I was like, well, I've come this far. I did a lot.
Did you finish his quest line?
Yeah,
So
the
I
Downs
didn't
one.
finish the quest.
No.
Oh,
So
Strauss's?
Strauss's specifically. So you do the final one when you're at Beaver Hollow, and on both of the last debtors, you have the choice of to just pay off their debt yourself.
Yeah, I did finish that.
And I was an honorable, so then he kicks Strauss out of the camp.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, fuck him. Like, get out of here. Like, he's the one that's making me do all this shit. I mean, it's really me doing it, but
yeah.
I was like, get out of here. And then you find out later that he got captured by the Pinkertons, and he didn't say shit. So, like, again, there's that theme of, like,
I didn't do
Strauss
that final
was really
one.
loyal and didn't say shit about the gang, but so that makes you feel bad for kicking him out and saying this is objectively a bad dude.
Wow, I didn't. So I did the final one where I was just like, you know what, forget your debt.
Yeah.
But I don't think I did the final part of that.
Yeah.
No,
That's really cool.
But the one where you beat up Thomas Downs in for those who don't know, because there's
that's
like
a
we were talking
required
to
one.
Rob. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a required yellow icon.
When he was coughing and like seeing the look on the kid's face, I was like, this has to come back somehow.
Yeah. This
is
Like
getting
originally I was like,
wacky,
maybe this kid will get revenge or something like that. But when
Just
he
like
starts,
Jack Marston.
yeah, when he
Yeah.
starts to cough, I was like,
Well,
oh.
so that mission comes back to you in multiple ways because if you do, they're optional later on. But if you finish the Downs thing, you like see her. She's become a sex worker in Annisburg, and like the kid's working in the mines, and he's getting abused by the like foreman or whatever. And you like, and she hates your guts. She's like, just leave us alone. And you like give them money, and she's like, you keep meddling in our life, leave us alone. And finally, he's like, just take my money and please just get out of this town. And then in addition, like he's really sick and she sees how sick he is. And she's like, you know,
But then
she points it out.
So I did that and I gave them a ton of money. And then I came back to Annisburg and there was like a cutscene where you saw her taking John essentially into a room and she just like you look at her and she's just
Oh,
stares
really?
at you
So
with
she didn't leave?
hatred, yeah.
Oh,
and
fuck.
she just didn't leave.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
So even
you
though
ruin her life.
So even though
Yeah.
you try and make amends, like
It
any
didn't
way
do
you
anything.
can, you've just messed up those people's lives irreparably. And that was like it was just a 10-second thing, but it's
Yeah.
so
It's-
well done.
I would highly recommend doing that quest, even though we just described it. Like it was really impactful just seeing her look at you and see how sick you are. And she just knows and she sees like she like bores into you. And it's a lot.
So like several people have broken out the video of you beating up Thomas Downs on YouTube. So I looked it up, and a lot of the commenters, if you watch it, it looks like, I don't know if like they would have understood how the disease worked enough, but a lot of people thought he spit in Arthur's face on purpose, his blood.
You borrowed money from my business partner, Herr Strauss. You owe him, you took the money. He wants it back, what's not to understand? Where's our money?
I don't have it.
Sell your place.
We already owe more than it's worth.
Then sell your wife, or your family, or something.
So I thought
Coughs, right?
I thought he coughed and was just like accidentally, because they make a big deal of it. Arthur like wipes his face, and then on the ride back to camp after that, it's really quiet and it's cinematic mode, but there's no music or like ambient noise. It's just Arthur, and he like wipes his lips again. I was like, that felt weird. That was one of those things like you mentioned, felt out of place at the time. Then looking back, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it served a purpose. But a lot of people in the comments were like, no, he did that on purpose. But I was like, I felt like that. I don't know if I don't know if people in 1899 understood that you can transfer the disease through cough. I think they did actually, because Arthur knows that's how he got it.
You'd think they would understand the basics of
Yeah.
it, but either way, I thought it was just I punched him so hard his mouth was bleeding, and he like I totally did not connect that he had TB. Did
Yeah.
not. I was just like, wow, I really fucked him up. Like I was just like so not. I wasn't even thinking about it.
Because I didn't realize that that's how he got it until later. I saw the nun from Saint Denis, and Arthur told her, he's like, yeah, I've got TB, I'm dying. I got it from beating up this debtor. I was like, what? And I was like, oh, so Arthur knew, he understood it. But I don't know at what point he found out, but I didn't really think about that until then. Then I went back and looked at the scene. I'm like, oh my God. Because Edith Downs says he's not well after you beat him up. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, jeez.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like, so in a sense, like, I think Arthur feels like he's already paying for the shitty things he's done. So that kind of makes it even more powerful that he's still trying to help John because he hasn't like fully like redeemed himself, but he is dying because of a bad deed he did, and he still chooses to try to help out the good people of the gang, which I really loved.
And then moving on to Rains Falls and Eagle Flies, you kind of mentioned them before about how getting involved in a conflict that maybe they shouldn't be involved in.
Yeah, I really like the character of Rains Fall a lot. I think he's another one that shows Arthur what a real leader can be.
His mission, where you go riding around and picking herbs, and you find out about Arthur's son, was a really
which like Rob Handler entirely missed it because he forgot how to.
Rob was messaging me about that mission because he was asking me like how far left he had to go, and I was like, that thing about Arthur's son, huh? And he was like, what? And I went, you hit L2 and talked to Rainsfall, right? And he was like, yeah, but I asked him about his son.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I really liked that.
Oh man,
it's nice for him to open up to somebody, and I liked their relationship a lot. I found that it was very uncomfortable, that set of missions, because it's uncomfortable because in real life I know how horribly fucked up it is, and they're doing what people really did in real life. So I was just kind of like, I know I shouldn't be here. I'm doing something horrible. I'm playing both sides with these people, and I'm just ruining everyone's life.
We didn't start this, Arthur. They did.
We? This ain't our fight.
It surely is.
Whatever it is you're planning, it ain't a good idea. They want you to fight.
Nobody will be killed.
We're just gonna trap a few of them in the valley, disarm them, tar and feather them, and remind them to leave these boys alone.
You have energy for pranks?
Come on, Arthur. Just tweaking Uncle Sam's nose a little. I need you to help me.
It's really upsetting, but I think they did a good job of like making you feel that and making it clear that what you're doing is just not okay in any sense.
Yeah, whenever you like made progress with Rains Falls, you do a mission with Dutch and Eagle Flies, and you just undo everything you did, and then you do another one and try to fix it again, and then undo, and then eventually I like how Charles is like, I'm just gonna stay here and help them out.
It's really funny because I was talking to you, and you were talking about how so much of Red Dead 2 mirrors the first game.
Yeah.
Chapter 6, or was it? Yeah, Chapter 6, the getting involved with the conflict between the Eagle, like Rains Falls tribe and like
the U.S. Army.
The U.S. Army. That's not the first time in the game you do that. You do that with the Braithwaites and the Greys, but this one, like, you're fine with the Braithwaites and the Greys because they're two rich families, and it's just like this petty squabble. And I love that chapter. That's probably my favorite part of the game. Playing like
rolling up on that
that's
man.
my favorite part.
That was so dope. But now it's got so much like Arthur's like. That was all right. That was kind of, it was still fucked up, but now
I was kind of like, they deserved it.
Yeah.
Like, I was so okay with that.
And now, like, we've
little
already,
Jack.
And like, for all the times that Dutch he tries to like relate to the Native Americans, he's like, oh, we're just as wanted as you are. I'm like,
that made me so uncomfortable. I was like, that's not true at all.
Yeah. Like, if you think about where he goes in the first game, which is technically like a sequel now, you kind of see that that's
the
now
seeds of that.
He seeds that, and he deliberately creates a gang out of the Native Americans who have been displaced and who are...
He feeds off their anger.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And he stokes their anger.
Yeah.
Like, and I felt really uncomfortable throughout that whole time, but like, I like how that played out ultimately. But
I think I think that chapter is very well done.
Especially with Arthur, because he's just saying like, Dutch, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?
Because he connects with Rainsfall, and then I think Rainsfall is really the one who kind of like pulls him out of his loyalty to Dutch in a way that nobody else has, because he's like, he's just a different kind of leader, and he sees that. I will say one of my favorite sections, and I think mechanically that supports the narrative a lot, is when the ceremonial like items are stolen, like the army steals them, and Rainsfall is like, please don't hurt anyone, please just go get them back. And I could not stealth that.
Yeah, me neither.
I couldn't do it, and I think that compared to like something like Guarma, where I was just like, okay, I'm tired of these same structures. This one I was like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, I'm not a good enough person to not kill these dudes. Like, and I thought that the structure, the similar mission structure there was used really well, because you're just like, I tried, I reloaded like 3 or 4 times, and I was just like, I can't, I'm just going to kill all of them. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I like knowing I was doing the mission for Rain's Fall. I was like, "Fuck yeah, I'm gonna use the tomahawk. Just it feels appropriate." And I started tomahawking people, and then I was like, I don't know, because the items are right next to the campfire in the center camp. Like, I don't know how anybody could have done that. Like maybe a distraction.
I think
at
you're
first.
supposed to lure them out, and I tried all sorts of different approaches. I tried stealth knockouts, and I wanted to do. I was like, I want to be good for him, but I couldn't be. And I thought that was really well done.
A nice touch too that I found during that last chapter is when Dutch and Arthur chase down by the cliff, and there's the river, and Dutch has that little speech about you can't fight gravity, which is also the last thing he says in the first game.
I tried to fight change. It's a waste. I see that. Now, it's a waste. You can't fight nature, Captain. You can't fight change. You can't fight gravity.
Yeah.
That speech is so good.
Which, like, immediately I heard you can't fight gravity, my ears perked up, and I was like, I know this. This is cool.
Yeah, you know, like, so he says that right before he jumps off a cliff to kill himself in the first game, right? This time he's jumping off the cliff to escape. I guess different kinds of escape, but similar in that sense.
Yeah, it's kind of nice little bow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I loved that. I thought that because it was, I don't know, there's so much in this game, and we with what he does with Native Americans, with that speech, that you're just seeing like his shift into what he becomes. That it's so well done. His arc is so well done.
Do we want to talk more on Dutch's betrayal and like how that all shakes out?
Sure.
Because a lot of it happens in this last chapter.
Yeah, when he left Arthur in the oil building.
Yeah.
Damn. I knew at some point it would have to come that he would do that, because he'd done that to John already. And I knew that he would do that to Arthur at some point. And it was maybe one of the biggest gut punches in a game I think I've ever had, because I always assumed there would be some loyalty still. I was so mad.
Yeah.
I was really mad.
It was done so well.
It's like, you bastard. But yeah, like I think when I talked about John earlier, I think that moment where you realize, oh, we're in the same boat. He wasn't going to save you, and he's not going to save me, is a good bonding moment for them.
Let's talk about the ending. The ending of chapter 6, not the ending of the epilogue.
So like that's actually like, so I feel like I love that the epilogues exist, but I do feel like the ending of this game is when Arthur dies. Fighting Micah, I wanted him to kill him. I wanted to kill him so fucking bad.
Yeah.
Seeing Dutch walk away, and that scene didn't shake out how I thought it would, and then Arthur was just left to like die slowly with the sun setting or rising.
So I think it's different depending on how you played the game. So if you're honorable, that's how he dies. I don't know.
Yeah, so the dreams he has are also different throughout the game depending on if you're
It's
honorable.
a wolf.
It's
if
a wolf.
you're dishonorable.
Oh,
it's like a stag. I got the stag.
Basically, only Eddie McHugh has been playing dishonorably, and he's not done. So he'll tell us how Arthur dies. But yeah, it's like a wolf lunging at you if you play dishonorably, and we get if you played honorably, which I think the game encourages you to play honorably. I think you're kind of pushed in that direction. It's hard to be dishonorable in a lot of ways.
His dreams or like
his dreams?
Oh, okay, gotcha. But he dies.
I don't know how he dies. I don't know.
No, apparently he dies. The ending is supposed to be different. I don't know if he may die. He may die the same way, but there's supposed to be some difference.
There are differences according to PR, but
I'm gonna look on YouTube.
We don't know.
I feel like there's a lot of scenes that would have played out differently. Like I wonder if Sadie would have said I was as good of a person if I had been an outlaw.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. This playthrough now. I'm trying to be evil, but I'm still too early to really.
Rain's Fall have liked me as much.
Yeah, I think you're generally pushed to being honorable, and so that. To me, that seems like the true ending is like just dying at sunset on like on that ridge.
Yeah.
And after just like fighting so hard and failing to kill Micah, and apparently I didn't. John alludes to this later, but you give John your saddlebag.
I saw that.
Yeah,
so I was wondering why I have all of my weapons from the beginning of the game. I was like, oh, he gave him my satchel.
But
you have his journal too.
You have his journal.
I didn't know that. Shit.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can, and John writes in it.
What? I didn't know that.
So
Okay,
John,
handwriting too.
he picks up the journal, but you can look back on Arthur's journal. But I didn't. I didn't see anything like that. I don't know if I was crying about my horse dying or whatever.
Oh, I was
so upset.
so I have had the same horse. So
was it Tennessee Walker?
My horse is the big one that Hosea you get with Hosea, like the really big
Shire.
one, the big black
Oh,
one.
mine was called Shire. Oh, the one you can sell.
You can sell, but I
never
kept
mind.
him and I sold the one that the game forced me to buy in that weird mission.
Yeah.
And named him Biff. And I've, had Biff throughout this whole 60 plus hours. And then Biff dies. And I was going, oh, fuck.
And then Arthur's like
Yeah.
cradling
Oh my
the
God.
horse.
I was like, it's
like
okay, boy.
they knew.
He whispers.
Oh my God.
Did you hear? He whispers "thank you" to the horse. I fucking bawled.
So I was like, Roach. I was
Yeah.
so upset because I
named it
had
after-
him forever.
I named it after one of my cats, and he died. And then all of a sudden, like he's like, "Thank you," and I was like, "Oh no!" And then I just started fanning my hammer at all the dudes who shot him. I was like, "Fuck all of you."
So I missed if he gives John the saddleback.
He
That
puts
was
his
my
hat on.
point.
He puts his hat on.
Yeah,
John
he does.
too.
I saw
Yeah.
that. I did see that, but I didn't see him
Yeah.
giving him his what do you call it? His
Satchel.
personal
Yeah.
accoutrement
Yeah,
or whatever.
Shout out to the music in the section where he died. Like the whole
Oh,
soundtrack,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Is
The soundtrack is great.
amazing.
I like.
I cannot wait for that.
I like the death
Has to be
song
seen.
better than. There's a
Is it
song where.
Stand Unshaken.
I love that song.
Yeah.
There's a song before that when you're riding. It's when Arthur says he has to go solve something back at camp. It's before when Mrs. Grimshaw gets killed, when Micah kills her. It's before the
yeah.
standoff.
Yeah.
And there's a song on the way back that sounded like a soap opera, like a John Mayer song almost.
And
It's like,
didn't
this
they
doesn't
cut
seem
it in with like
fit.
dialogue from like?
Oh
older
yeah,
parts?
it was so
And
heavy-handed.
I
It
didn't
went
like
into
that part.
That I didn't
was
like that. I didn't like that either.
Like I get it's like
It felt.
So much. I think Stand Unshaken though.
That was
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
that was great.
That was really
Yeah.
good.
I think my favorite song is from the final like epilogue mission when you're on the mountain though.
yeah,
That's
it's
really
like
good.
the remixed not remixed, but like the expanded version of the Red Dead 1 theme. And
Yeah.
So this is again epilogue talk, but when you do that first mission and you're saving the neighboring ranch, and it's the first time they use the Red Dead 1 music, I was like,
He pulls out his box and he puts on his ripped
Yeah.
denim vest. The first time you see him dressed like that, he
Oh my
steps out of the house
God.
like, like
I was like, yo.
that was dope. Oh, that was really good.
I guess we can just jump right onto the epilogue then.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's you put here about how it's interesting seeing John try to
Yeah.
kind of find the American dream legally.
Yeah, it's like he's got land, he's trying to buy land, he's in debt to the bank. The whole bank sequence is like, "Oh, we own you now. You're a true American." And it's like it went back to like
It
was
felt
a nice-
very rock star, that whole
I know,
exchange.
Rockstar does
very-
not like capitalism
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
It was a really good bridge between Red Dead 2, which is like one of the only Rockstar games that I felt like had a warm story, and then the like cynicism of Red Dead 1 and like all the GTA games. And it's like, "Oh, we own you now." And you could see that like tonal transition, which was awesome. And
Yeah.
like,
Well, what's great is like that you can look at that as just like, oh, we own you. That's a funny line, but they actually do own John, and that's like the whole plot of
Yeah.
Red Dead 1 is the fact that the
He's
government
owned.
owns John.
Yeah. I feel like so much of this game mirrors the first game, and we talked about this a little bit in ways that reminded me of like the way Force Awakens mirrors A New Hope.
Yeah.
And that I don't think it's like there's some things that I predicted would happen because I'm like, well, this is a lot like what happened in 1, but I found them to be really smart mirrors in a lot of ways. And so I think the end section where you're like just learning how to build a fence and like helping a kid break a horse and like that stuff is a lot like the end of 1 where you're teaching Jack those things. And I think it has the same impact of like, okay, we're slowing down. Like we're really trying here, but something keeps coming up and he's just not escaping it.
also when you're going back to the lumberyard after you build the house, which again that was cool, just like building the house that you know
Oh,
from
that
the
was
second
such-
game
Oh,
or from the first
God, I
game.
know.
But when you're starting to build the barn and you're thinking about how John dies, you're like, oh wait, because it was the barn, right?
Oh,
Where
when
he's
he
like
goes,
kicks open the
right?
door to go
Yeah.
and he dies. He gets shot.
So the first time I walked through those doors in this game, I got chills.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is this is the last thing John does.
Yeah.
He walks out these doors.
It's like the reverse of
Yeah.
Or no, like when I walked into the barn, I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, yeah.
After I think it's when you get drunk with Uncle and Charles after you build the house and you wake up and you kind of go outside and you're on the bit where your grave will ultimately be. That is what got me because I was like, oh, this is where my wife's grave is.
Yeah, like at the very after you've like after the credits, when you come in and John and Abigail are standing on the ridge overlooking the house,
And
at the exact spot where their graves will be. And Abigail's like, I love it. Like, that crushed me so much. I was like,
it's also like, no, they feel like they finally escaped the gang days, and you know what happens. Like, I would say, like, by and large, until the epilogue, I didn't think you needed to play the first game. There were some cool things, but like the epilogue, I don't think the epilogue. If I hadn't played the first game, I would be like, well, I don't want to do any of this. Like, none of this means anything. It's similar to like what you said at the end of the first game. Like, why am I ranching? And then you realize it's to set up the relationship and then have Jack kind of get revenge. But this, I was like, and this is long. This is like a 7-8 hour epilogue. And I was like, oh my God.
That was like one, like when we were talking about features and stuff, there was like, oh, should you play the first one? Like, how much do you need to know? And I was trying to like not spoil anything, but I was saying like, yes, you should absolutely play the first one because the epilogue will be long and bloated and you probably won't appreciate it. I mean, it's still fun, but I think your knowledge of the first one is super important for that epilogue.
I think it is, but bringing Sadie and Charles in there helps.
That's true. That's true.
And having the Micah stuff helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the whole proposal sequence is one of my favorite things in the entire game. I loved that mission so much. It's such a nice,
so nervous and awkward.
It's such a nice respite from everything else you're doing. You go take the photo. She's like, "What are you doing, you moron? Like, what is this? This is not like you." You get out on the boat, and that was just the cutest. I was like, he's actually trying with her. She left him. He left her. He abandoned them at the beginning of Jack's life. Like, he's finally getting his shit together. And it's very cute and also sad.
The whole thing, like, was completely bittersweet. And I think from that point onwards was when I was kind of, like, had a lump in my throat because you know what's going to happen. And especially during the credits as well, they had all these little vignettes of
the
what happens to everyone
wedding
and the wedding and everyone dancing and Sadie leaving them and Charles leaving them and it was so well done. And it was the kind of payoff that's after, you know, I guess if you put both games together, you're talking about what, like 100 hours? And it just felt like such a good and deserved emotional reaction from me. Like, I don't think I've had that with a game since maybe like Mass Effect 3, where you have such a connection to these characters. And even though like you don't really, in the grand scheme of things, spend that much time with Abigail, it felt like it was more quality time spent with her in the epilogue. And
I wanted that to last forever. I was like, I'm just because you know he has a couple years. They have like what 3 years or something, 4 years.
So one thing they didn't talk about, which I was kind of surprised about, is the fact that they actually had another child,
the daughter,
daughter, who didn't get mentioned as far as I can tell.
He mentions her to Bonnie in the first game,
and she dies. And like,
of cholera, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
forgot about that
don't know
too.
if they just thought, hey, maybe that's going to be too sad. Let's keep this on and up, guys. Or maybe that's what happens in between the closing credits of 2 and the start of 1.
Well, so the problem with the timeline of that is, I think it's Javier says something about your children, which would imply that the daughter was alive when the gang was still together.
Yeah.
And she would have died sometime in between the events of 1 and 2.
And I mean, to be fair, like, I'm kind of glad they didn't, because I think that would have just really...
That would have been a lot.
Especially like during that epilogue stuff, that would have been really rough to have that happen, I think.
And the way you can explain away the children comment is that like that's more of a progeny, like children in the general sense of like, oh, you're who's coming after you. So you can just say you
have one, maybe you've had another.
Right. Like you can explain that away. It's not like a huge canon breaking thing, but
plot hole.
Yeah.
Let me write an angry comment on the internet.
I really did like how, apart from those like post credits like little vignettes, you don't really end up interacting with Ross at all. It kind of is just like the rest of the, like, you're free to mess around, do whatever you want as John Marston, which is something I desperately wanted in the first one. I like Jack, but I did not want to play as Jack.
Work you down, Jack.
Yeah, because of
hated
like
his
voice actor and I don't know, just you get so attached to John Marston, and I think it's brilliant in the first one that you don't get to play as John Marston at the end, but I still wish you did, and I think it's an incredible feeling to finish the game and have nothing to do except just be John Marston and kind of explore the world as him. But there is one scene that we should still probably talk about, which is the final scene when you ascend the mountain and the music plays and you.
So good.
It's really good.
It's hard.
It is hard. I died a couple times.
I died a couple times. I started to like
That
cheese
was-
around the corner of the mountain.
Yeah.
That was the first time in the game I used tonics like regularly.
Yeah.
I was like, I
same.
better supercharge my health. Yeah,
But
I loved that.
it was so well done.
I was happy to die. I was like, I'll listen to this music again.
Yeah.
But I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting to see Dutch. Like, I really wasn't.
Neither was
wasn't.
I.
I thought he just kind of scarpered, but
I think shooting Micah when he was holding the gun to Sadie's head was finally like, I think maybe he knew all along that Micah was the one who, like, because Arthur told him, he's like, Micah was the one that talked, and like Micah's like, he's lying in his dumb voice. But I think Dutch knew all along, but he recognized that Micah was helping advance his own self-interest.
Yeah.
I think finally shooting him was the ultimate, like, I only care about myself. Like, this all along has been about me.
And that was really cool too, because it almost takes the revenge out of it. Like, yeah, you come there and you kill all of the grunt members of that new gang they founded, but like Dutch is the one who shoots Micah, and it's like, I found that really well done. I really liked that.
Well, sorry. So he shoots him once, and then you can fucking light him up. So that was satisfying. For sure. Like,
Oh well, yeah.
I thought when
that-
he shot him, like, no, Dutch, I wanted to do that. And then all of a sudden, John just pulls his gun, and it's highlighting all the weak areas. I'm like, I don't care, I'm gonna shoot him everywhere.
No, it was
Yeah.
nice to shoot him after that, but I thought like the initial shot coming from Dutch was really
for sure,
impactful.
yeah.
because I thought for sure Dutch was gonna shoot me.
Yeah, I was like
And so for him to
John has been
I
shot
thought for
so many
sure
times.
I thought for sure he'd kill Charles and Sadie just to wrap up those stories. So I was happy to see that they were still around.
Where is our like Sadie Bounty Hunter DLC? I just want to I want to be able to play the game because I don't want to ruin John's life. I don't want to do Bounty Hunter shit as John. I want John to enjoy his like 3 remaining years with his wife and child and uncle.
Yeah.
She must
Rufus.
be an online character.
I
Like
hope
in
so.
one, you could play as most of the.
Yeah.
Well, in this one, in online, you'll be able to create your own character, but I have a feeling she'll be like a quest giver, mission giver, like GTA did
that's how you
that.
get the bounties.
But I think it would be really cool if we see like maybe 2 DLCs, Charles and Sadie,
That would be
just to kind of
so
wrap up their
good.
stories.
But
But
Undead Nightmare was a banger of a DLC.
yeah, it
So
was great. But I think one last thing, we're running out of time, but one thing we should probably talk about is, did you guys have a chance to explore New Austin at all?
Yes.
Thoughts?
So, well, first of all, the mission with Sadie when you were, I think the first bounty you do with Sadie is in the first place you go with Lee Johnson and you take out a gang there who have been cattle rustling. I think it's
Yeah,
that
the
mission.
bowlers, I think, the bowler
Yeah.
gang.
So that was nice. But then I went down to Armadillo and I actually did like a kind of weird thing. Like I did a lot of role playing when I was playing the game itself and like taking things super slowly and taking them all in. And when I was looking at going between Blackwater and Armadillo, like I pretty much knew the way, which is weird for a game that I haven't played in, 5 to 8 years. But I recognized so much of it. And then when I was approaching Armadillo, I kind of got off my horse and I just walked in. And then for it to be pretty much in flames, everyone's gone because of the cholera, I thought, sure, it's a clever plot device, but I kind of wished there had been a little more there.
Yeah.
Because I went to McFarlane Ranch and there was no one there.
I
There
feel
were
like
people, but just no one.
But I did
No one you would-
find, soul-crushingly, I did find the body of Bonnie's betrothed, who had a love letter to her, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm fine with not seeing Bonnie because I've had this moment, but it's super easy to miss. Like it
Yeah,
was
I did
just
not get that.
it was a corpse that had washed up ashore, and I was like, okay, that's fine. But going to McFarlane Ranch and like looking around the the hut that she puts you in and around Armadillo, and I was like, oh hey, that's the room that I rented in the saloon and stuff.
You don't know this yet, John, but you're gonna live here at one point.
Yeah.
Did you go to Tumbleweed? Because Tumbleweed is no longer a ghost town, which is pretty cool.
I think that's super
didn't.
cool.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Thieves Landing either, actually, come to think of it.
Thieves. Do you want me to tell you what is in Thieves Landing? It's not that exciting. It's
Yeah.
just a gang hideout, which
Oh,
makes sense,
cool.
right?
Yeah, yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
in the game they talk
Yeah.
about how it's like basically just a gang hideout
Yeah.
that's kind of civilized.
But Tumbleweed not being a ghost town is super cool.
Yeah,
Totally
there's like
forgot
a
about
there's like a general store. There's specific clothing to Tumbleweed, and like they kind of hint at what happens. I think like a guy comes in with a bounty and throws him down, and he's like, "This, we caught this guy," and he's like, "If you guys hang me, like 47 Mexicans are gonna roll through here and burn this town to the ground and chase everyone out." And the sheriff's like, "We don't take threats from gang members," and just shoots them. And then like, I don't know, I'm just assuming that that's probably what happens to Tumbleweed is they get a warning and everyone just leaves.
I wonder if you hang around long enough, you'll see it.
I don't know.
Like a Westworld.
That'd be pretty cool.
That's a good question.
Like plotline.
Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap this up?
The closing credit song is a banger.
Is that the Josh Homme
Josh
one?
Homme one. Damn. I've been listening to it on repeat because
I didn't know Josh Homme was in this game until then. Like I didn't.
Yeah,
hear
he's one of
about
the
it.
NPCs.
Yeah.
Wait, he's in the game.
He's Sadie Adler.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like I missed so many other things.
That's why our voice is so good.
It's true. There's probably an array of things that I would like to talk about, but I guess they're minor in the big picture.
It's been over an hour already.
Yeah.
There's so much I still want to see. I guess is the final note. Is like I still need to just ride around.
I'm gonna play it again.
I do like how the game handles the existing side quest givers when you go back as John. They'll kind of like recap it like previously on, but they do it like normally. They're like, who was it? The artist, I forget his name. His initials are CC in Saint Denis, the French guy.
Him guy.
He'll be like you kind of the way you figure out that you both knew him guy monsieur him guy the way you find out that you both knew Arthur or like is kind of and you're picking up his mantle is pretty well done.
When you hunt down the gunslingers, if you don't finish that and go to talk to the author, he'll be or John will be like, so this is kind of weird, you don't know me, but I have my friend's like notes here and he mentioned you and you might need help with something.
So there's two people I want to shout out. The guy looking for Gavin gets old.
Yeah.
So I ran into him. Like, does he ever find Gavin?
No,
I saw him
ran
6
into
times,
him in Blackwater.
Yeah.
And he was like all disheveled and he was a mess and he's like, Gavin, and like he's like slowly unraveling and John's just like, have a good one. And then I want to talk about Mickey, the veteran, the one-armed veteran in Valentine. If you go back to him as John, he's like, I knew a fellow like you. He didn't like me much either, but he at least listened to me. Wow. And well, if you actually were nice to him as Arthur,
I think I gave him some money.
Yeah,
I hugged him.
I mean,
I
hugged him. I was very uncomfortable.
Oh,
but
he spoke very highly of my Arthur.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, you remind me of a fella who was like super nice and like I thought that was pretty cool.
He admits that he's not actually a veteran, but like it was nice to go back and see him, and I thought that was a cool touch. Yeah.
Worth the 8-year wait? Is it? Everyone think?
Well, I didn't wait 8 years, so
I think
so.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, that's our spoiler chat. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, we still have plenty of more Red Dead stuff coming, including our show Quick Draw, which this is a part of. This is an episode of Quick Draw, I believe. We'll see. And Dirty Artie, which is where we make Arthur as much of a mess as possible. But that's it. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thanks.
May I stand unshaken amidst a crash of words.